My name is Olivia, and if you could step into the archives of my memory, you'd find one day embossed in golden letters. Our wedding day. The air was filled with the sweet aroma of roses and jasmine. Everything seemed bathed in a soft, magical glow, the kind that you find in fairy tales but rarely get to see in real life. It was the day I married Steve, my high school sweetheart, the man I thought was my forever. "Are you nervous?" My best friend and maid of honor, Emily, asked me as she adjusted the veil over my hair. "A little," I admitted, taking a deep breath. "But it's the good kind of nervous. I can't wait to start the rest of my life kind." We both chuckled, a moment of levity before the gravity of the life-altering ceremony ahead. Steve looked absolutely dashing in his tuxedo. As I walked down the aisle, his blue eyes met mine, and it felt as if time slowed. It was like one of those moments in movies where the protagonist realizes they're exactly where they're meant to be. He was my anchor, my constant, the center of my world. As the vows were exchanged and our lips met in a solemn yet exhilarating kiss, our friends and family erupted in cheers. The air was thick with love and promises, and in that instant I felt invincible. I felt that together we could take on the world. "You may now kiss the bride," the minister declared. As Steve lifted my veil and our lips met, I felt like I was floating. It was as if all the love poems, all the romantic movies, and all the love songs had culminated into that one kiss. Finally, "Mrs. Olivia Thompson," Steve whispered in my ear as we pulled apart. "And ecstatic to be so, Mr. Steve Thompson," I replied, my eyes glistening with tears of joy. That night, we danced under the stars, our bodies swaying to the rhythm of our hearts. Our wedding was everything I dreamed it would be, a testament to our love, a foundation for our future. "It was truly perfect," Steve whispered to me as we swayed to our favorite tune, the last dance of the evening. "Yes, we were," I agreed, leaning my head on his shoulder, blissfully unaware of the twists and turns that life had in store for us. For years, that memory remained untainted, cocooned in the sacred space of my heart. So when you picture me, picture that Olivia, the one who thought love was an unbreakable bond, the one who believed in fairy tales, because that Olivia, naive as she was, still exists somewhere deep down, a testament to the power of love and the sometimes harsh lessons life teaches us. After the magic of our wedding day had slowly given way to the routine of daily life, Steve and I found ourselves navigating new terrains, both emotionally and financially. I remember sitting down one evening at our dining table, a modest one we'd picked out from a local thrift shop when we first moved in together. Amid a sea of bills, our eyes met and we both knew that our lives were taking different directions. I had recently landed a promising opportunity, launching an online business with a college friend. Our venture was in eco-friendly, sustainable products, and to our surprise, it picked up quite fast. Within months, we had expanded our reach and the money started flowing in. Steve was working as a factory worker, a job he'd held since we met. It was steady work, but the income was nowhere near what my business was generating. As I worked late into the night, crunching numbers and devising marketing strategies, he'd come home, tired and worn, smelling of sweat and engine oil. "How was work?" I'd ask as I heard the front door close. Same old," he'd say, kicking off his boots. "But tell me about your day." "It's growing, Steve. We're making connections, forging partnerships. It's all so exciting." "That's my girl," he'd say, wrapping me in his arms. "Sky's the limit for you." But over time, I noticed a subtle shift. He'd still ask about my day, still hug me when I shared good news, but the light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something I couldn't quite pinpoint, perhaps envy, perhaps insecurity. It was a flicker, a shadow, easily dismissed, but never entirely gone. "Another successful month, Liv?" he asked one evening, a forced smile on his lips. "Thanks to you," I'd always reply, hugging him tightly. "And you've always believed in me," he would say, but his voice lacked the conviction it once had. The financial dynamics had changed, and although we still laughed and held each other, the laughter was a bit more forced, the embraces a bit less warm. I tried to bridge the gap by involving him in my success, even suggesting he could quit his job to pursue his passion for painting, which he had set aside years ago. "What do you think about setting up a small studio for you?" I suggested one weekend, imagining a space filled with canvases and colors. I don't know, Liv. It's been so long. Steve, we can both fly, I insisted, but the words felt hollow, lost in the widening chasm between us. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the magic that had bound us together seemed to be eroding, leaving behind a residue of unspoken emotions and unresolved tensions. Little did I know that the strains would soon reach a breaking point, that the life we had imagined would come crashing down in a way I could never have anticipated. For better or worse, we were setting out on different paths, ones that would test the strength of our love and the depth of our commitments to one another. And as I would soon discover, love is sometimes not enough to keep two people together. Sometimes the paths diverge too far, the distances become too great, and you find yourself standing at a crossroads, a place where all the love in the world can't bring back what was lost. As months rolled into years, the distance between Steve and me widened like a river expanding its banks, yet love, or what I thought was love, kept us anchored. And as my business continued to flourish, I was consumed by a new dream, a dream that wasn't just about Steve and me, but about family, roots, and leaving behind a legacy. One day, as I was reviewing some architectural designs on my computer, I looked up and caught Steve watching me from across the room. The glow of the laptop screen cast a soft light on my face, and I smiled at him. I'm thinking of building a house for my parents, I finally told him one evening over dinner. A beautiful, spacious house with enough room for everyone. Steve raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a grand gesture, Liv. You sure about this? I am, I said, my voice firm. They've given me so much, and this feels like the perfect way to give back. Steve's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, but then he nodded. If it makes you happy, Liv, I'm all for it. And so, the blueprints turned into foundations, the foundations into walls, and the walls into a home. It was a sprawling mansion of a house, set on a picturesque piece of land. My heart swelled with pride the day the construction was completed, as if the house itself was a testament to my love for my family, to the ideal Steve and I had once shared. We'll move our families here, I whispered to Steve as we toured the finished house for the first time, my arm looped through his. It'll be our forever home filled with love and laughter. Sounds perfect, he said, but his voice lacked the enthusiasm I'd hoped to hear. It was as if he was agreeing to a distant dream, a cloud floating high above but never touching his reality. What do you think about the kitchen? I asked, excitedly pointing to the state of the art appliances and the marble countertops. Mom's going to love this. It's great, Liv. Everything's great, he replied, his gaze distant. Is something bothering you? I probed. No, it's just a lot to take in, he said, avoiding my eyes. I should have seen the signs then, the reticence hiding behind his carefully chosen words. I should have read into his distant look, the emotional detachment that was becoming more and more palpable. But I didn't. I was blinded by my own success, by my own desire to share that success with those I loved. So when the house was finally ready, standing there like the physical manifestation of my dreams and hopes, I thought it was our new beginning. I thought it was our new beginning. I thought it was a page turned, a chapter begun afresh. I thought that this house, this grand gesture, would fill the widening gaps in our life, would bring us closer to the fairy tale we had lived on our wedding day. I was wrong, but I wouldn't find out just how wrong I was until that fateful day when everything I'd built, both literally and metaphorically, came crashing down. The house stood, a monument to my love, my ambition, and my blindness, all rolled into one, and as I would soon discover, it would become the battleground for the unraveling of all the promises, spoken and unspoken, that Steve and I had once made to each other. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that felt full of possibilities, as Steve and I pulled up to the driveway of the newly completed mansion. My heart pounded with excitement. I couldn't wait to give my parents the grand tour, to see the wonder in their eyes and the pride on their faces. Today's the day, Liv, Steve said, squeezing my hand as we stepped out of the car. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, my eyes surveying the magnificence before us, a physical manifestation of years of hard work and dreams. Just as I was about to step inside, I heard the sound of another car pulling up. I turned around to see a familiar car, Steve's parents' battered SUV. What are they doing here? I whispered to Steve, surprised. Oh, I invited them, he replied nonchalantly. I thought they should see the place too. But this was supposed to be a special day for my parents, I said, a tinge of disappointment in my voice. Don't worry, Liv. There's enough room and grandeur to go around, he assured me, but his words seemed void of warmth. As we welcomed his parents, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The atmosphere felt tense, like a string pulled too tight. My intuition, which I had ignored too many times before, sent warning signals I couldn't decipher. The tour began, and I guided our families through the maze of rooms, each one a tribute to my relentless determination and ambition. My parents were clearly moved, their eyes misty with pride and gratitude. But throughout the tour, Steve and his parents whispered amongst themselves, their body language increasingly uneasy. Finally, we stood in the grand living room, its cathedral ceilings rising high above us. It felt like the perfect moment to announce my plans for the house, the grand finale of this emotional journey. I built this house for my family, I began, my voice tinged with emotion. For my parents who've given me everything, and for the family that Steve and I would have someday. This is more than just a house. It's a home where I hoped we would all make countless memories. As the words left my lips, I noticed Steve exchanging glances with his parents. Before I could ask what was going on, he took a step forward. Actually, Liv, he began, his voice eerily calm. The room went silent. I felt as though the air had been sucked out of it, leaving me gasping for breath. What did you just say? I finally managed, my voice trembling. You heard me, he said, meeting my gaze for the first time. You can leave. I looked around, stunned. My parents were speechless, their faces etched with confusion and hurt. Steve's parents, however, looked almost triumphant, as though they'd been waiting for this moment. Every fiber of my being wanted to lash out, to question how he could do this to me, but something stopped me. Instead, I simply nodded. All right, I said, fighting back tears, if that's how you feel. Without another word, I turned around and walked out, leaving behind the house that had been my dream, my grand gesture of love and gratitude. As I sat in the car, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, I realized the scope of Steve's betrayal. He didn't just want to take away a house. He wanted to rip apart the narrative of love and partnership we had built over the years. He wanted to be the victor in a war I didn't even know we were fighting. And that's when it dawned on me. The house, magnificent as it was, had been built on credit. A debt I was more than willing to pay off, but one that was still pending. As I drove away, a mirthless smile crept onto my face. Steve might think he had won, but he didn't know the whole story. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations and paperwork, a labyrinth of clauses and conditions that made my head spin. My parents were shattered, their dreams dismantled as quickly as they had been built. And through it all, Steve remained an enigma, his intentions as confusing as his sudden betrayal. About a week later, I received a text from Steve. We need to talk. Urgent. My eyebrows shot up. The last time we'd spoken, his words had been as sharp as daggers. I pondered for a moment before texting back. Fine. Your place or mine? Yours? He replied almost instantly. As I opened the door to let him in, I couldn't help but notice the worry etched on his face. Gone was the smug confidence that had marked our last interaction. What's so urgent? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I've been getting calls from the bank, he began, pacing nervously. They're saying that the house is built on credit and the first payment is due. Why didn't you tell me? Didn't you say you and your parents would be living there? The responsibility's yours now, I said, my voice icy cold. This isn't a joke, Olivia. That's a lot of money and you know my job can't cover it, he argued. And whose fault is that? I countered. You wanted the house, you wanted me out, and you got what you wished for. Look, can you at least sign it back over to you and sort this out? He asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Why should I? You were so eager to claim it, along with your independence from me. Deal with it. Steve's face flushed a deep red. You set me up, he accused. I didn't set you up. I built a home on the premise of shared love and responsibility. You were the one who changed the terms, I retorted. He stared at me, realization dawning in his eyes. So what happens now? Are we done? You told me to leave, remember? You made that choice for both of us, I said. In that case, I want a divorce, he declared, his voice thick with emotion. A wave of sadness washed over me, not for the love lost. That had been gone for some time, but for the trust broken, the partnership dissolved. Still, I nodded in agreement. "If that's what you want, then so be it," I said, resolute in my decision. "You realize this means I'm saddled with $1 million debt?" he said, his eyes searching mine for a flicker of regret. "You chose that path, not me," I replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. We stood there, two people who had once vowed to stand by each other, now separated by a chasm of betrayals and broken promises. The air between us was thick with the weight of unsaid words, the finality of a chapter closing. He walked out, and as I closed the door behind him, I knew it was more than just a physical departure. It was the end of a journey we had embarked upon with stars in our eyes and dreams in our hearts. A journey that had now reached a bitter end, marred by deception and heartbreak. As I sat down, my phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer, confirming that the divorce papers were ready for review. It was really over. I looked around my apartment at the walls that had once heard our laughter and felt our love. Now, they stood as silent witnesses to a love story that had gone awry, a tale of dreams built and demolished. But as the saying goes, sometimes things have to fall apart to make way for better things. And as I scrolled through the divorce papers, another thought crossed my mind. Steve might have left me, but he had also left himself with $1 million debt. It was a burden he would carry, a lesson learned the hard way. And me, I was finally free, unshackled from a love that had turned toxic, a relationship that had lost its way. It was the end, yes, but it was also a beginning, a fresh start that I had paid a heavy price for, but one that I would seize with both hands. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its golden glow over a world tinged with both sorrow and hope, I couldn't help but think that sometimes the most painful endings are also the most liberating ones. And so, with a newfound determination and a heart ready to heal, I braced myself for the journey ahead. A journey that would be all my own, steered by the choices I made, fueled by the lessons I'd learned. It was the end of an era, but it was also the start of something new. And for the first time in a long time, that thought filled me with a sense of peace, a sense of closure. After all, sometimes you have to lose it all to find yourself again. The divorce proceedings went smoother than I expected. Perhaps it was because we had no children, or maybe it was because we both knew that the end had been long overdue. Within weeks, the papers were signed, and just like that, the legal ties that bound us were severed. But for me, it was a bittersweet moment. I sat alone in my apartment, the divorce papers lying on the table in front of me like a grim trophy. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Steve. "Can we meet one last time? There are things I need to say." I hesitated. What more was there to discuss? But maybe, just maybe, this was the closure we both needed. I agreed. We met at the cafe where we'd had our first date, a place once filled with the promise of love, now serving as the backdrop for our final farewell. "You look good," Steve said as he sat across from me. His eyes seemed tired, weighed down by the events of the past weeks. "You too," I lied. He looked defeated, as if life had drained the vitality out of him. "I guess this is it," he began, avoiding eye contact. "It is," I said, staring into my cup of coffee. "Do you regret it? Us?" he asked softly, finally meeting my gaze. I thought for a moment. I don't regret the love we had, but I do regret what we became. Steve nodded, as if expecting this answer. "I messed up, Lev. I let greed and ego cloud my judgment, and now I'm paying for it." "And what about me?" I asked. "What was I supposed to pay for?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I guess I thought you'd always be there, regardless of how I treated you. I took you for granted, and that was wrong." "Yes, it was," I said, my voice tinged with bitterness. "You decided the fate of our relationship the moment you told me to leave our home, the one I built." Steve sighed. "It's under foreclosure now. My credit is ruined, and I've moved back in with my parents. My life has fallen apart." I looked at him, the man I had once pledged to love in sickness and in health, in richness and in poorness. How quickly those vows had been shattered. "Sometimes, life gives us the lessons we refuse to learn ourselves," I said. "I suppose you're right," he conceded. A silence enveloped us, heavy with the weight of our shared history and individual mistakes. We had come full circle, back to the very place where our love story had begun, only now it was ending. "Goodbye, Steve," I said, standing up. "Goodbye, Liv. I hope you find the happiness you deserve," he replied, his eyes meeting mine one last time. As I walked away, I felt an overwhelming sense of finality. This chapter of my life was closed, sealed away with ink on legal papers and tears in deserted cafes. The man who had once been my everything was now a stranger, a footnote in the story of my life. It was a sobering thought, but it was also liberating. I was free to rebuild, to rediscover the woman who had been lost in the maze of a toxic relationship. I could focus on my career, nurture the relationships that truly mattered, and most importantly, love myself unconditionally. As I stepped into the crisp evening air, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from an old friend, someone I had lost touch with during the whirlwind of my marriage and subsequent divorce. "Long time Liv. Would love to catch up when you're free." A smile spread across my face. Yes, it was the end of Steve and me, but it was also the beginning of so many new possibilities. And just like that, the door to the past clicked shut, allowing the windows to the future to swing wide open. Months had passed since the divorce was finalized, and life had started to return to its normal cadence, or at least a new version of normal. My career continued to thrive, and my relationships with friends and family were stronger than ever. I had rediscovered the Olivia who loved life, who found joy in simple things, and who didn't define her worth by someone else's behavior. One day, as I was working on a project, my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa, a mutual friend who had somehow managed to maintain her friendship with both Steve and me despite our messy breakup. "Hey Liv, just wanted to give you a heads up. Steve is not doing so well financially. His parents had to move out of the house because they couldn't keep up with the payments. It's being auctioned off." I stared at the message, my feelings a tangled web of emotions. There was relief, a touch of vindication, and also a pang of, was it guilt? Before I could delve deeper into my emotional quagmire, another message popped up. "Olivia, can we talk? I need your help." For a moment, I was transported back to our happier times, when "I need your help" was a phrase filled with love and mutual respect, not desperation and deceit. I pondered for a minute before agreeing to talk. He suggested we meet at a park, neutral territory for what was sure to be an uncomfortable conversation. As I approached the bench where he was seated, I noticed how much he had aged. The lively spark that once danced in his eyes seemed to have dimmed, replaced by a haggard, resigned look. "Olivia," he said softly as I took a seat beside him. "Steve," I acknowledged. "I guess you've heard about the house," he began, skipping any pretense of small talk. "Yes, I heard." "I don't know what to do, Liv. My credit is ruined, my job is unstable, and my life is a mess," he said, his voice tinged with desperation. "What do you want from me, Steve?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "I need money, Olivia, to settle my debts, to get my life back on track. I know I don't have any right to ask, but you're my last resort," he pleaded. For a second, our entire relationship flashed before my eyes. Our first date, our wedding day, the happy times, and the eventual fall. And then I thought of the house, my dreams, and his betrayal. "Are you asking for revenge, Steve? Or justice for what you did?" I asked, looking him squarely in the eye. "I don't know. Maybe both," he said, his voice almost a whisper. I paused, taking a deep breath. "I'll give you the money, Steve, but not because you asked or because I want revenge or justice. I'm giving it to you because I want to close this chapter of my life completely, once and for all." His eyes widened, disbelief registering on his face. "You would do that? After everything?" "Yes," I said, "and consider this my final act of love for the man I once knew, not the stranger sitting before me." A wave of emotions washed over his face, relief, gratitude, and perhaps a hint of shame. "Thank you, Olivia," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "Don't thank me, Steve. Just take this as a lesson and make better choices in the future." And with that, I stood up and walked away, feeling lighter than I had in years. It was as if a weight had been lifted, a final string cut, freeing